What if I told you that Leonardo da Vinci invented machines that could have changed history completely, but they were never built? Today we're diving into 10 forgotten Leonardo inventions that actually worked and exploring how different our world would be if someone had just said yes to building them. Starting with number 10, the solar furnace might sound boring, but stick with me because this one invention alone could have prevented wars. Leonardo sketched these compound parabolic mirrors that focused sunlight onto a single point, creating temperatures hot enough to melt metal. Think of it like using a magnifying glass to burn ants, except way more powerful and useful. He even designed clockwork mechanisms to track the sun throughout the day, keeping the mirrors perfectly aligned. Here's the crazy part. This technology was completely buildable in 1500. Bronze workers at the Venice arsenal already knew how to hammer and polish metal into curved shapes for ship armor. All they needed to do was shape those pieces into parabolic segments and arrange them in a dish formation. Even with the imperfect mirrors of that time, they could have reached temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt tin and lead or soften iron for working. If Florence's die makers had built just one of these furnaces in 1515, they could have cut their fuel wood consumption by 30%. That might not sound like much, but Mediterranean forests were disappearing fast because everyone needed wood for cooking, heating, and industrial processes. By 1600, entire regions could have been running glass workshops and iron forges on pure sunlight during the day. The ripple effects get wild. Spain's La Mancha Plateau, which has tons of sunshine but barely any trees, could have become a major iron production center. The Spanish Armada would have had better wood supplies for shipbuilding after their 1588 defeat, possibly mounting a successful second invasion of England in 1598. That changes the entire colonial map of the Americas. But here's what really blows my mind. Widespread use of solar tracking devices would have made everyone comfortable with the idea that the sun follows a predictable path across the sky. When Copernicus published his theory that Earth orbits the sun in 1543, regular people who calibrated their solar furnaces every day would have found the math familiar and sensible. The church might have accepted heliocentrism decades earlier, changing the entire relationship between science and religion. Moving to number 9, the self-supporting bridge sounds simple but was revolutionary. Leonardo designed an interlocking lattice of logs that held itself up using only gravity and friction, no nails, ropes, or pegs needed. Soldiers could throw one together in literally the time it took to say a prayer, creating instant river crossings up to 15 meters wide. The engineering is beautifully simple. You cut timber to specific lengths, notch them at precise angles, and lay them in a crisscross pattern. Each piece locks the others in place, and the more weight you put on it, the stronger it gets. Modern engineers have built these bridges and confirmed they work exactly as Leonardo designed. If Duke Ludovico's engineers had used this design in 1499 while retreating from French forces, they could have crossed the Adda River in minutes instead of hours, completely outflanking King Louis's army. Word of wooden bridges appearing out of nowhere would have spread across Europe like wildfire. Within a century, every army would have carried pre-cut bridge kits. The Ottomans would have developed a lighter bamboo version for desert campaigns. But the real revolution would have come from merchants demanding the same technology for trade routes. Italian city-states would have invested in modular bridges along every major river, cutting transport costs by 20%. Cheaper transport means the overland spice route through the Levant stays competitive with Portuguese ships sailing around Africa. Venice keeps its trading empire longer, Portugal has less money for distant colonies, and the entire age of exploration unfolds differently. Jesuit missionaries would have brought the design to China by 1600, where it would have merged with local rainbow bridge techniques to create even better designs. By 1700, we might have seen true technological exchange between Europe and China, not just one-sided colonialism. Number 8, the Mechanical Knight, was basically a programmable robot built in 1495. This armored automaton used lute strings, pulleys, and gears to move its arms, neck, and jaw. The clever part was the torso full of helical cams that could be rearranged to change the movement sequence, making it the world's first programmable machine. Islamic inventors had been making automated figures for centuries using water clocks and cams, but Leonardo added the ability to reprogram the movements. Milan's armorers could forge the plates, and clockmakers could cut the cams. This wasn't fantasy, it was buildable technology. Instead of just entertaining at parties, imagine swordmasters in 1540 using these knights as training dummies. Students could practice against unpredictable thrust patterns, improving twice as fast as traditional training. Spain could have sent mechanical drill sergeants to train New World recruits, creating more disciplined armies. The real revolution comes from applying the CAM programming concept to other machines. Textile mills could have had programmable looms by 1700, a full century before Jacquard invented his punch card system. France enters the Industrial Revolution with semi-automated textile production, competing with British mills from day one instead of playing catch-up. The intellectual impact runs even deeper. When Leibniz visits Paris in 1672 and studies a preserved mechanical knight, he abstracts the cam stacks into binary choice keys. This plants the seeds for mechanical computation not just in Babbage's 19th century London, but across Europe, with inventors building on Leonardo's concept of stored instructions. We might have had mechanical computers by 1750 instead of 1850. For number 7, the ideal city plan addressed the deadliest problem of Renaissance life: disease. After Milan's 1484 plague outbreak, Leonardo designed multi-level cities with upper walkways for wealthy citizens, lower canals for transporting goods, wide boulevards where 2 loaded carts could pass, and most importantly, flushable stone toilets connected to sloped sewer. This wasn't pie-in-the-sky dreaming. Milan already had navigable canals, and architects were sketching utopian cities. Leonardo just combined traffic management with public health engineering. Duke Alfonso d'Este could have built a pilot suburb outside Ferrara by 1505, using brick-lined sewers that gravity flushed waste into settling ponds before releasing it to the river. The results would have been staggering. Death rates could have dropped from 50 per thousand yearly to just 30 per thousand within 2 decades. When neighboring cities copied the design, the Great Plague waves of the 16th century would have been blunted. The 1575 Italian plague that killed hundreds of thousands might have been contained to small outbreaks. Healthier cities mean fewer trade interruptions from quarantines. Mediterranean ports stay commercially competitive longer instead of losing business to Amsterdam and London. Southern Europe retains more of Spain's New World silver, building stronger manufacturing instead of watching wealth flow north. The entire economic center of Europe might have stayed in Italy and Spain rather than shifting to the Netherlands and England. The dark side? Those separate upper and lower levels would have literally embedded class divisions into city architecture. By the time of the French Revolution in 1789, radicals would have listed the tyranny of upper streets among aristocratic crimes. Sometimes even the best public health measures can become symbols of oppression. Number 6 brings us to the aerial screw, Leonardo's helicopter design. He sketched a 4-meter-wide helical rotor made of linen that 4 men would spin by pushing bars, theoretically screwing their way into the air. Modern physics tells us human muscles can't generate enough power-to-weight ratio, but let's imagine they replace the men with a massive torsion spring wound on the ground. Using cedar wood for lightness and reducing crew to minimum, this spring-powered jumper might achieve a 10-second hop reaching 3 meters high. Not flight exactly, but enough to amaze audiences and attract investment. Torsion springs powerful enough already existed in siege weapons. Picture Pope Leo X watching Leonardo demonstrate this device in Rome's Belvedere courtyard in 1514. The craft leaps up, hovers briefly, then crashes, but the riders float down safely using Leonardo's parachute invention. The spectacle convinces wealthy patrons to fund aerodynamic research. By the 1540s, mathematician Girolamo Cardano publishes the first scientific analysis of lift and drag. He calculates that real helicopter flight needs power-to-weight ratios beyond human capability, but suggests steam power might work. Remember, our alternate timeline already has early steam engines from the self-propelled cart development. French engineer Denis Papin combines a lightweight steam cylinder with paddles by 1670. It still can't fly, but when he turns it horizontal, he invents the screw propeller for boats. Suddenly, Dutch traders have propeller-driven gunboats dominating Southeast Asian rivers, cementing their spice trade monopoly decades early. The quest for flight creates formal aeronautics as a university discipline. Italian professors study air screw dynamics, combining calculus with fluid mechanics. When Newton formulates his laws, he thinks of air as a partner in creating lift rather than just resistance to motion. This accelerates progress in ballistics, meteorology, and even medical understanding of breathing. The psychological barrier to human flight crumbles, and hot air balloons might appear in the 1600s instead of 1783. Number 5. The 33-barreled organ gun represents Leonardo's solution to Renaissance warfare's biggest problem, rate of fire. He designed 3 banks of 11 small-caliber guns on a rotating mount. While one bank fired, another cooled, and the third reloaded, creating nearly continuous fire at 200 balls per minute. The technology was completely feasible. German soldiers already used paper cartridges for handguns, pre-measuring powder charges rolled in parchment. Scaling up to feed multiple barrels just required better logistics, not new inventions. 3 to 5 centimeter bore iron tubes were routine products for any competent foundry. If Cesare Borgia had deployed this weapon at the Siege of Urbino in 1502, it would have shredded defenders on the walls. News of guns that never stopped firing would have revolutionized European warfare overnight. The famous Swiss pike squares that dominated battlefields would have been torn apart by continuous fire. The death of pike warfare would have crippled Switzerland's economy, which depended on mercenary income. Without unified military culture, Swiss cantons might have fallen under Austrian control by 1550, giving the Habsburgs control of Alpine passes centuries early. But the real revolution comes from manufacturing. Constant demand for rapid-fire weapons forces foundries to standardize bore diameters. Gunsmiths in Liège and Brescia accidentally invent the concept of interchangeable parts 2 centuries before Eli Whitney. Clockmakers borrow these precise tolerances to mass-produce watch movements. By 1650, middle-class townspeople carry pocket watches, not just aristocrats. When everyone measures time in minutes instead of hours, industrial discipline comes naturally. Factory work seems less alien when your whole society already runs on clockwork precision. Coming to number 4, the diving suit Leonardo sketched for Venice shows his practical engineering at its best. He designed a leather suit sealed with boiled linseed oil and wax, glass goggles, breathing tubes to floating air bells, and even a urine release valve for extended dives. This wasn't theoretical. Venice needed underwater saboteurs to defend its lagoon. Every component was buildable with existing technology. Goat leather could be made watertight, glass blowers already made small clear panes, and reinforced leather tubes could supply air down to 10 or 15 meters. That's shallow by modern standards, but perfect for cutting anchor cables or drilling holes in enemy ships. When Venice deploys 4 frogmen against French galleys at Chioggia in 1508, forcing enemy retreat in dangerous currents, naval warfare changes forever. Venice establishes a diving school that spreads techniques to other maritime cities. Regular underwater hull inspection and barnacle removal becomes standard practice. Ships with clean hulls sail 10 to 12% faster. Venetian merchant convoys make the Alexandria run in less time, turning over capital quicker and undercutting Portuguese spice prices from the Cape route. Lisbon's monopoly crumbles, forcing Portugal to negotiate with Indian rulers instead of imposing military control. The scientific impact might be even greater. Regular divers would have documented marine life decades before microscopes made biology fashionable. A 1532 book describing cuttlefish jet propulsion and sponge reproduction would have pushed natural philosophy toward field observation. Europeans would have seen oceans as complex ecosystems to study and manage, not empty spaces between continents. Number 3 takes us to the self-propelled cart, often called history's first robot. Leonardo designed a 3-wheeled vehicle powered by coiled leaf springs with differential gearing and programmable steering. Think of it as a Renaissance wind-up toy scaled up to carry real cargo. Milan's clockmakers already built spring-driven automata, so the technology existed. The main challenge was forging consistent spring steel, an art German smiths had nearly mastered. With proper funding, working prototypes could have rolled through Italian streets by 1505. Beyond spectacular court entertainments, where mechanical carts portraying mythological scenes glided across plazas, architects would have quickly seen practical uses. Leonardo's survey cart with odometer wheels and ink droppers could automatically trace property boundaries, revolutionizing land measurement. Military engineers facing chronic manpower shortages would have sent unmanned carts loaded with gunpowder rolling toward enemy positions, detonating on impact like primitive cruise missiles. but the deepest impact comes from legitimizing stored energy vehicles. If spring carts can travel 100 meters, why not try steam power? By 1650, French inventors combined pressure cooker technology with differential gears from the cart to create working steam tractors. Too weak for transportation but perfect for pumping mines, these machines boost coal production decades early. Britain loses its industrial advantage as continental Europe develops steam technology in parallel. The survey cart also transforms governance. Accurate land measurement enables fair taxation across the Papal States by 1600. Instead of a reactionary counter-reformation, a financially secure Vatican funds scientific academies to compete with Protestant intellectualism. Catholic astronomers in Bologna published detailed star charts in the 1620s. The science versus religion conflict that poisoned centuries of European thought never fully develops. Number 2. The armored fighting vehicle Leonardo sketched around 1487 looks remarkably like a World War I tank. This turtle-shaped wooden shell bristled with cannon ports around its full perimeter, moved on wheels turned by internal cranks, and featured sloped armor to deflect projectiles. The weapons were standard, bronze culverins and iron falconets that any foundry could produce. Leonardo's deliberately incorrect gearing diagram suggests he wanted to protect the design, but reverse engineering shows that oxen or horses could pull the 8-ton vehicle at walking speed on level ground. If Duke Ludovico had commissioned 2 prototypes for the Battle of Navarra in 1500, their psychological impact would have exceeded their combat effectiveness. Swiss mercenaries, the best infantry in Europe, had never faced mobile artillery platforms firing grapeshot at point-blank range. Even one successful deployment would have triggered an arms race. Ottoman engineers would have built lighter, camel-drawn versions for desert warfare. Siege tactics would have shifted from bombarding walls to advancing protected gun platforms. Fortification design would have accelerated, with star forts adding lower outer works specifically to trap and disable these early tanks. The long-term impact reshapes European military thought. Protected mobility proves its value 3 centuries before the Somme. German states develop combined arms tactics, mixing cavalry, infantry, and armored wagons. When Gustavus Adolphus reforms Swedish warfare in the 1620s, he inherits mature doctrine instead of starting from scratch. The 30 Years' War ends by 1632 instead of dragging on until 1648, saving Germany from devastation. A stronger Holy Roman Empire balances French power, creating a multipolar Europe that colonizes more cooperatively and less destructively. Finally, number 1, the parachute Leonardo drew in 1485 seems almost anticlimactic until you think through the implications. His pyramid-shaped design used linen stretched over a wooden frame, allowing someone to throw himself from any great height without harm. Modern tests prove it works, though the rigid frame makes it heavy. Linen sailcloth and wooden spars were everyday materials. A well-funded workshop could have built prototypes within months. The challenge was weight, but even the rigid design safely carried a 100-kilogram person when tested with modern reconstructions. Imagine Ludovico Sforza funding these escape devices for scouts on siege towers in 1503. After successful 25-meter jumps, Venice copies the design for sailors forced into the rigging during storms. Spanish garrisons drilling tower descents would have pioneered vertical warfare, dropping soldiers inside fortress walls. Fortification design changes immediately. Bastion traces add covered galleries and glossus slopes to prevent aerial infiltration. But the psychological shift matters more. Routine falling without dying makes humans comfortable with vertical space centuries before aviation. When hot air balloons finally appear, they seem like natural evolution rather than terrifying novelty. The parachute becomes a gateway drug to flight. Europe enters true aviation not in 1783 but in the late 1600s, when craftsmen familiar with parachute canopies sew hot air envelopes strong enough to carry people. Louis XIV surveys Versailles from a tethered balloon, while cartographers map battlefields from above. Military intelligence, weather prediction, and simple human perspective all transform generations early. These 10 inventions individually would have nudged history. Together, they create a compound effect that's staggering. By 1700, our alternate Europe has cleaner cities with sewers and survey carts, soldiers drilling beside wooden tanks and rapid-fire guns, armies crossing instant bridges while parachutists scout ahead, divers maintaining ships powered by propeller engines, workshops running on solar heat and mechanical programs, all while scientists study flight dynamics and debate heliocentric theory without religious persecution. This isn't fantasy. Each machine used only materials and skills available in Leonardo's time. The tragedy isn't that Leonardo dreamed too big, but that his patrons dreamed too small. The next time we dismiss an idea as ahead of its time, remember these 10 machines gathering dust in notebooks, waiting centuries for someone brave enough to say yes. Let's build it and see what happens.